The Westfield is where my wife walked every evening for 16 years. She walked it in blue rubber boots with a border collie at her heel. After she died of cancer, I kept walking it every Sunday at sunset, in her boots, 2 sizes too small. Then last fall, the new HOA president across the road decided that field was the perfect spot for her daughter's rustic outdoor wedding. She didn't ask. She bribed a county clerk to forge a permit. She set up 200 white folding chairs on my wife's field. What Bridget Halloran didn't know was that I'd been a Kentucky farmer for 33 years. My manure spreading schedule was on file with the county 14 days in advance, and the Right to Farm Act made the operation untouchable. At 7:05 Saturday morning, I drove a John Deere onto that field with 2,000 gallons in the tank. Where are you watching from? Drop a comment. My name is Wyatt Caldwell. I have farmed 287 acres of bluegrass country in Bourbon County, Kentucky, since my father handed me the deed in 1991. He'd had it from his father. His father had bought it in 1894 from a Confederate widow named Letitia Anders, who needed the money and didn't want to look at the back 40 anymore. The original survey is still framed in the front parlor. I run a small cow-calf operation, 48 head of Black Angus. I cut hay off the West Field every June and again every September. I have a 30-acre patch I lease to a tobacco neighbor every other year. I drive a 2008 Ford F250 with a tailgate dent I have never bothered to fix. I am 56 years old. I served 4 years in the Army from 1988 to 1992, and I do not generally talk about it. The farm has not been a wealthy operation in 3 generations. It has been a profitable one in only 2. But it has been ours for 131 years, and the land has fed every single person on the deed. My wife Maggie died 4 years ago, this past June. Breast cancer. We had 18 months from diagnosis to the morning I found her hand cold in mine. She was 49. We had bought the West Field together in 1995, with money she saved teaching 2nd grade at Paris Elementary. After we paid it off in 2003, she walked it every evening at sunset. Same blue rubber boots, a border collie named Pearl trotting at her heel. Pearl died the winter before Maggie did. Maggie said it was a small mercy. I didn't argue. After Maggie was gone, I kept walking the West Field every Sunday at sunset, alone, in her boots, 2 sizes too small. It hurt. I did it anyway. Everyone in Bourbon County knew I did it. Nobody ever talked about it to me. Sheriff Earl Van Sant used to drive past my fence line on Sunday evenings just to make sure I was upright. Pastor Calvin Hatfield used to skip the second hymn at Sunday service so he could be in the parking lot to nod at me when I pulled in. Hollis Mortensen, my attorney, never sent me a bill for the entirety of 2022. I do not know if my friends understood that I knew what they were doing. I think they did. I think they did not want me to thank them for it. Bourbon County is that kind of place. The trouble started in 2020. A developer named Doug Halloran bought the old Pettijohn dairy farm across the road and put up 142 luxury homes on it, 3-car garages, stone veneer facades, a wrought iron gate with the words, "The Meadows at Whitestone," in gold leaf. None of the new families came from Bourbon County. Most came from Lexington and Louisville. They bought houses they had only seen on Zillow. They moved in expecting bluegrass without any of the things that grow bluegrass. Doug Halloran's wife Bridget became HOA president in 2021. She wore Lily Pulitzer prints over white jeans and walked her Cocker Spaniel down the gravel shoulder of our shared frontage road every morning at 7:30. Within a month of taking the gavel, she filed her first formal complaint with the Bourbon County Health Department. The complaint was about the smell of cattle manure drifting east on the spring breeze. It was dismissed in 4 days under Kentucky Right to Farm Act, KRS 413.072. She filed 13 more over the next 20 months. All were dismissed. Then, in March of this year, she walked up my driveway in a pink linen blazer. She offered me $5,000 to rent my West Field for her daughter Madison's October wedding. I was leaning on the fence by the barn, drinking black coffee out of an enamel mug that had been my father's. I let her finish. Then I said, "Ma'am, I have a manure spread scheduled on that field the week of your daughter's wedding, and that field is where my wife used to walk. So thank you, but no." Her smile did something I had seen on the faces of women in negotiations my late wife had warned me about. It did not fall, it just hardened. "Mr. Caldwell, you will regret this." She walked back to her pearl-white Range Rover. The Cocker Spaniel trotted after her. The wind off the west field smelled like cut hay and cool September morning. I poured the rest of my coffee out under the fence. I went inside. I called my attorney. I had been farming long enough to know exactly what was coming. The next 6 months were the longest construction project of my agricultural career. By April, Bridget Halloran had been seen twice walking the perimeter of my west field with a Lexington wedding planner named Celine Wickersham, both of them in white sneakers and big sunglasses, neither one acknowledging the no trespassing sign nailed to the fence post. By May, Bridget had submitted 3 more health department complaints, one about a concerning amount of livestock activity near her property line, one about uncertified well water runoff, and one about the aesthetic impact of a hay barn I had built in 1987 with my father. All 3 dismissed. The complaints were starting to look less like complaints and more like a paper trail Bridget was building for something else. In late July, Celine Wickersham filed a request with the Bourbon County Tourism Office for wedding venue accreditation of a parcel that did not belong to her client. The request was denied. Celine's name was added to a list that, weeks later, would prove to be very useful in court. In late August, I drove down to a livestock auction in Louisville to bid on 6 replacement heifers. My daughter Eliza came over from her school to have dinner with me at a steakhouse on Bardstown Road. We talked about a boy named Andrew she was thinking about marrying. I tried to listen without making the face fathers make. I drove back on Sunday evening through soft, slanted September light that made the hay rolls in every passing field look bronze. I made the turn onto Caldwell Lane at 6:45 p.m. There were 6 unmarked trailers parked along the gravel shoulder of my west field. 2 crews of men in matching navy polos were unloading aluminum tent poles from the back of a flatbed. A diesel generator was humming behind the gazebo I had built for Maggie's 50th birthday in 2018. A man in a yellow vest was driving an auger into my pasture to set what appeared to be the foundation for a wooden dance floor. Strings of unlit fairy lights lay coiled in plastic bins. A florist truck idled by the gate with the back doors open and a refrigeration unit running. I pulled the pickup onto the shoulder. I rolled the window down. I did not get out. I took a slow breath. I let the muscles in my forearms unclench, one at a time, the way the Army taught me to do, before I was about to do something I would later be questioned about. A crew foreman jogged over. He was sweating and friendly. "Sir, this lane's closed for the next 6 days. We've got a private event set up in progress." "Is that so?" "Yes, sir. Wedding next Saturday. Permit and everything." "Whose permit?" He pulled out a laminated card from a clipboard. He showed it to me through the truck window. It read, "Temporary Event Permit, Bourbon County, Venue, Caldwell Family Farm, West Pasture, Approved, Venue Operator, Wyatt Caldwell, Approval, T. Pickerel, Zoning." I looked at it. I looked at the gazebo Maggie had unwrapped a birthday ribbon on 6 years before. She'd still had her hair then, her color. The rest of us had still believed it was going to be all right. I rolled the window back up. I drove the pickup the half-mile to my farmhouse. I parked. I went inside. I took my father's enamel mug down from the shelf above the sink. I filled it with bourbon. I drank it slowly at the kitchen table while the sun went down over the tents going up on my wife's field. Then I called Hollis Mortensen, my attorney at home. He picked up on the second ring. "Wyatt." "Hollis, there are wedding tents going up on my west field. They have a county permit with my name on it. I never signed any such thing." There was a long silence on the line. "Stay where you are. Don't touch a thing. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Hollis Mortensen is a 68-year-old country lawyer who keeps 3 sharpened pencils and a yellow legal pad in his jacket pocket. He has been my father's attorney and now mine since 1979. He grew up 2 miles from my farmhouse on a tobacco farm his grandmother walked away from in 1962 because the IRS made her. He has tried more agricultural law cases in Kentucky than any man living. He arrived at 6:58 in his 2014 Buick. He walked the field perimeter with me without speaking. He photographed every tent stake, every trailer, every laminated sign. He read the permit from the foreman 3 times. He did not ask the foreman his name. We walked back to the farmhouse. Wyatt, they have forged a county permit on your land. That is not a civil matter anymore. That is a felony. I made him a cup of coffee. Here is what we do, son. Tomorrow morning you and I drive to the HOA office. You hand Bridget Halloran a notice of trespass. I serve it personally. You do not raise your voice. You do not threaten. And then? And then I drive to Frankfort and I sit down with a friend at the Kentucky State Police Public Integrity Unit. By Thursday, this woman will not know what kind of weather is coming for her. Then I said the thing I had been turning over since I'd seen the auger go into my pasture. Hollis, I'm scheduled to spread liquid manure on that field on Saturday. Hollis put his coffee cup down. It's filed with the county, 14 days in advance. Right to Farm Act, Section 3, subsection B. It's the routine spread. I do it every fall after the second cutting. Hollis looked at me for a long time over the rim of his cup. Son, you understand what you're suggesting. I'm asking if I have to cancel a properly filed agricultural operation because a stranger put a wedding tent on my land without my consent. The corners of Hollis Mortenson's mouth moved a quarter of an inch. He took out a yellow legal pad. He clicked one of his pencils. He wrote a single sentence at the top. Operation Regina, KRS 413.072. Regina? My grandmother, the one the IRS chased off. She fed Bridget Halloran's grandfather a sandwich once at the back door of her kitchen in 1939, and he never thanked her. I have been waiting for this case my entire life. The next morning at 9:15, Hollis and I walked into the HOA office at the Meadows. Bridget Halloran was sitting behind a marble-top desk in a coral cardigan with a vase of pink peonies at her elbow. I handed her the notice of trespass. Hollis read it aloud on the record. Bridget did not stop smiling. She slid the laminated permit across the desk. Mr. Caldwell, the county has authorized this event venue. You are not in a position to object. Ma'am, I never signed any permit. The county has the signed copy on file. Filed by Theodore Pickerel, Bourbon County Zoning Office. You are welcome to dispute it in court, after the wedding. You should have taken my offer. Hollis put his hand on my arm. I did not speak. We walked out. That afternoon, Hollis drove to Frankfort. That night, I sat on my porch with a glass of buttermilk and watched the diesel generator hum across the field that had been Maggie's. I did not feel angry. I felt patient, the way a fire feels when it has not yet been lit. I had a manure spreader in the equipment barn. I had a 4,000-gallon tank. I had a schedule on file with the Bourbon County Agricultural Extension Office. I had a sheriff who had hunted with my father. I had an extension agent whose grandmother had known my mother. I had an attorney who had been waiting for this case since 1962. And I had a wife who had walked that field in blue rubber boots every evening for 16 years. I had everything I needed. For the next 3 days, I did the work of a farmer who knows his routine has been declared a battlefield. I moved my 48 head of Angus to the south pasture. I serviced the John Deere 7250R. I greased the gimbals on the manure spreader and tested the PTO at low RPM. I drove to the Bourbon County Agricultural Extension Office and pulled 3 copies of my filed spread schedule, dated August 22nd, stamped by Pat Brenneman, the extension agent. I dropped one off at Hollis's office. I kept one in the kitchen drawer. I taped the third to the inside of the equipment barn door. On Tuesday afternoon, Celine Wickersham hired a private security guard to stand at the gravel shoulder of my west field. He had a clipboard. He took down my license plate every time I drove past my own driveway. On Tuesday evening, my daughter Eliza called. Daddy, I'm seeing posts on Facebook about a wedding at the farm. I know, sweetheart. Whose? A woman named Bridget Halloran's daughters. They have not asked my permission. They have forged a county permit. There was a long pause. Daddy, what are you going to do? I poured myself an inch of buttermilk and stood at the kitchen window. The sun was setting orange over the gazebo. 3 men were stringing white bulb lights across the dance floor frame. Eliza, I'm going to spread manure on Saturday morning on the schedule I filed in August. Hollis is going to file the criminal complaint on Thursday. Sheriff Van Sant is going to be there to observe. By Sunday, I will have my field back. The woman who lied to her daughter about it will be in jail, and the wedding will be held wherever it should have been held in the first place. My daughter laughed, the first laugh I had heard from her since her mother died. Daddy, Mama would have loved this. I know. After she hung up, I sat at the kitchen table and looked at a framed photograph of Maggie on the bookshelf, taken in the West Field in 2017, in her blue rubber boots with pearl at her heel. I said, out loud, "I'm sorry it took me this long." On Wednesday morning, Hollis called. "Wyatt, the forged permit has been confirmed by the state. There is no record of your signature, no notary, no county fee paid. Theodore Pickerel stamped it himself, out of order. He has been on the take from Doug Halloran's commercial real estate company for 2.5 years, 3 small bribes a year, mostly under the table, totaling $31,400. KSP Forensic Accounting traced every dollar of it through a Lexington check cashing shop owned by Doug's cousin. KSP, Public Integrity, has put a quiet warrant on Pickerel, Doug Halloran, and Bridget Halloran. They will execute Saturday morning at sunrise. They want your manure spread to draw out the wedding crowd and the news camera. They want the videotape. They want the headline. They want the small humiliation that does what no indictment alone can do. Make sure no HOA president in this state ever again tries to take a working farmer's land. And they want your field fertilized on the schedule you filed in August. I closed my eyes. Hollis, there's one thing I need to do before Saturday. I need to talk to the bride. There was a silence. Then Hollis said, "Wyatt, that is a very good idea." That Thursday evening, I called Madison Halloran. I introduced myself. I asked if she would meet me for coffee Friday morning at the Java Brewer in Paris. She paused for a long time. Then she said, "Yes, sir." Madison Halloran walked into the Java Brewer Friday morning at 8:05 in a pale yellow sundress, her hair in a French braid, no makeup, her wedding ring hand turned inward in her lap. She was 24. She looked 19. There was a tremor in her left hand she could not quite hide, and she kept that hand tucked under her thigh on the booth seat. I had ordered her a vanilla latte. She thanked me very quietly and sat down across from me at the corner table by the window. Outside, the dogwoods along Main Street were starting to drop their leaves. Mr. Caldwell. Ms. Halloran. She held her cup in both hands. She did not drink. My mother told me you signed off on the venue. She said it was a paid rental. She said she's been planning it with you for months. When she told me you were the property owner, I asked what your wife thought about all this. She said your wife had passed, but had loved my mother dearly. I let her get to the end before I reached into the leather folder beside me and laid the forged permit and Hollis's affidavit on the table. Madison read the affidavit twice. Her hands began to shake. She did not cry the way her mother would have cried. She cried the way a young woman cries when she suddenly understands she has spent 24 years being told a version of her own life that turns out not to have been true. She cried quietly. She did not wipe her face. "Mr. Caldwell, I am so sorry. I had no idea." I waited until she could lift her cup. Then I told her 2 things. The first was that her wedding was going forward on Saturday, but not on my land. I had a neighbor named Ned Garrison, whose family had built a stone barn outside Versailles in 1873. Ned had a coffee pot going right now, this morning, and was waiting for her call. The barn was hers if she wanted it, free of charge. The second was that on Saturday morning at 7 a.m., I was going to drive a manure spreader onto my west field and apply 2,000 gallons of liquid cattle manure, exactly as I had filed with the county on August 22nd. The Kentucky State Police were going to be present. They were also going to arrest her mother, her father, and a county clerk on charges of bribery, forgery, and conspiracy. She read every word twice. She set the affidavit down. "Mr. Caldwell, thank you for telling me. I would have walked down that aisle thinking my mother had paid you. I would have shaken your hand in good faith. I want you to know I would have meant it." "I know that, sweetheart." "What's your wife's name?" "Margaret. Maggie." My mother told me her name was Susan. She told me Susan loved the gardenias. I did not say anything for a moment. Then, "Madison, your mother did not know my wife." She nodded once, slowly. She stood up. She thanked me for the coffee. She took the slip of paper with Ned Garrison's phone number on it. She walked out into the cool Bourbon County morning and called Ned from the parking lot. By 8:45, she had a new venue. By 9:15, half the wedding party knew. By noon, the caterer had agreed to move. By 3 p.m., Madison's father's brother, a Versailles auctioneer who had not spoken to Doug in 11 years, had agreed to walk Madison down the aisle. Madison did not call her mother all day. Bridget Halloran did not yet know. That was the way I wanted it. By Friday afternoon, every piece I needed was in place. Sheriff Earl Van Sant, a 64-year-old former Marine who had grown up shooting jackrabbits behind my father's barn, sat in my kitchen at 1 p.m. and drank a glass of buttermilk while I walked him through the schedule. Earl had been a pallbearer at Maggie's funeral. Wyatt, I'll be there at 6:45. 2 deputies and cruisers. Lights off. I will not engage Mrs. Halloran unless she physically obstructs you. I will not let anybody touch the tractor, and I will not let her private security guard within 50 feet of the field. What if she tries to file an injunction? Earl smiled. Son, the only Bourbon County judge who could issue one is at his grandson's football game in Frankfort. The next one available is Monday. By Monday, the field will be fertilized, the wedding will be over, and Mrs. Halloran will be in custody. He drained his buttermilk. Wyatt, I have been waiting 4 years to see somebody do something for you. Your father would be proud. Pat Brenneman, the county extension agent, came by at 3. She brought 3 certified copies of my August 22nd filing and a printout of the Right to Farm Act with the relevant subsections highlighted in yellow marker. Wyatt, the statute protects established agricultural operations from nuisance claims filed by people who moved in afterward. You're a 4th-generation operation. The Meadows was built in 2019. You are protected. They are not. As long as you've filed your schedule, applied at standard agronomic rates, and not increased your operation size beyond historical baseline, you are bulletproof. Standard agronomic rates. 2,000 gallons per acre for a hayfield in October. Bourbon County's recommended rate is 1,800 to 2,002. You're right in the middle. She handed me a typed sheet, an agronomic application rate certification, signed by her. Pat, why are you putting your name on this for me? She shrugged. Because the law says I can. Because the law says I should. Because Bridget Halloran filed a complaint last spring claiming you had cattle manure run off into her sprinkler system, and I had to spend 3 days proving she was lying. Because my grandmother knew your mother. Pick a reason, Wyatt. She drove off in her county pickup with a wave through the open window. The afternoon sun caught the dust she kicked up and held it suspended above the gravel for a long second, the way Bourbon County light sometimes holds the things you almost forget to notice. At 5 p.m., Hollis arrived with a thick manila folder. Inside was a quiet title affidavit, a draft civil complaint, a federal mail fraud predicate, and 3 sealed declarations from Madison Halloran, Ned Garrison, and Celine Wickersham, who had agreed to flip on Bridget the moment she realized the permit was forged. Wyatt, we are loaded for bear. I poured him a glass of buttermilk. Hollis, what time tomorrow? 6:15. I'll ride the tractor with you. I looked at him. He was 68. He had not been on a tractor since 1981. Hollis. Wyatt, I have been waiting on this case my entire life. You are not riding alone. I did not argue. We sat at my kitchen table until the sun went down over the white bulb lights twinkling on Maggie's field. We did not speak for the last hour. We did not need to. The phone rang at 9:45. It was Bridget Halloran. I let it ring. It rang 9 more times that night. I let it ring every time. Bridget arrived at my farmhouse at 10:04 p.m. in her pearl white Range Rover, the headlights blazing across the front porch, the radio leaking a Kenny Chesney song. I had been sitting on the porch with the cordless phone and a half glass of buttermilk. I had been expecting her. She walked up the porch steps. She was wearing the same coral cardigan from Tuesday and a pair of low-heeled white pumps in the gravel. In her right hand was a black leather briefcase. Mr. Caldwell. Mrs. Halloran. She set the briefcase on my porch railing. She unlatched it. She opened it. Inside were 40 bound stacks of $100 bills. I would learn later it was exactly $50,000. Mr. Caldwell, I would very much like to come to a reasonable accommodation. My daughter's wedding is tomorrow. The setup is complete. I am asking you, neighbor to neighbor, to cancel your manure spread for 1 day. 1 day, Mr. Caldwell. I did not say anything for a moment. Then I reached very slowly into my left breast pocket. I took out my phone. I held it up so she could see the red recording light. Mrs. Halloran, the cameras on this porch have been recording you since you turned into my driveway. The cordless phone on my lap has been live with the dispatch line of the Bourbon County Sheriff's Office since 10:03. The audio of this conversation will be on Sheriff Earl Van Sant's desk before I go to sleep. The $50,000 you are attempting to give me will be Exhibit 4 in the federal bribery case against you. Please close the briefcase. Please get off my porch. Please go home and explain to your daughter that her wedding has been moved. For 3 seconds she did not move. Her eyes flicked between the briefcase, my phone, and the cordless on my lap. Her chest rose and fell. The Cocker Spaniel in the back of the Range Rover whined once and went quiet. Then she made a sound I will never forget. It was the noise of a woman whose entire life model had just told her it was not going to work anymore. 49 years of practiced charm collapsed in the space of half a breath, and what came out underneath sounded less like rage than like fear. She slammed the briefcase shut. She turned to walk down the porch steps. She stopped halfway. She turned back. "Wyatt, your wife." I stood up. I said, very clearly, "Bridget, you will not say her name." She blinked. "You will not stand on my porch, and you will not say her name. Go home." She did. She drove out with the gravel kicking under her tires. I sat back down. I drained the last inch of buttermilk. I called Earl Van Sant directly. "Earl, she just left. Briefcase of cash. Tried to bribe me. I have it on 4 cameras. I have it on dispatch. Beautifully done." "Earl, what time tomorrow?" 6:45. The KSP unit is staged at the Marathon Station on 627. They will move on the wedding crowd at 7:05, just as your PTO turns on. "Earl, thank you." He cleared his throat. "Wyatt, get some sleep. Your father would be proud." I hung up. I sat on the porch another hour. The diesel generator hummed. The white bulb lights twinkled. A cool October wind came in from the west, smelling of cut hay and the slow, patient ground of a county my family had farmed since Letitia Anders sold us the deed in 1894. I set the alarm for 5. I did not sleep. I did not need to. The fire was already lit. Saturday morning, October 18th, was the kind of clear bluegrass dawn that smells like coffee from 3 miles away. I woke at 4:45. I made a pot of coffee in the percolator that had been Maggie's. I put on the flannel shirt she had given me for Christmas in 2020. I walked out to the equipment barn at 5:15. I started the John Deere 7250R. I let it warm up for 20 minutes. I checked the manure spreader hitch. I checked the 4,000-gallon tank, already filled to 2,000 gallons the night before by my hired hand Sonny Albritton, who had been with me since 1998. The tank had a fan spray nozzle calibrated to a 30-foot arc at standard PTO speed. I greased the gimbals one last time. I checked the pressure gauge. I checked the wind. 3 knots out of the west. Steady. Perfect distribution conditions for a hayfield application in mid-October. Pat Brenneman herself could not have asked for better. Hollis pulled up at 6:09 in his 2014 Buick. He climbed up into the cab. He buckled himself in. He looked at me through the windshield. He nodded once. Sheriff Earl Van Sant arrived at 6:28 in a county pickup, followed by 2 cruisers with their lights off. "Counselor, you riding shotgun?" "Sheriff, I have been waiting on this case since 1962. "Wyatt, KSP just radioed. They're staged at the Marathon. They'll move the moment you turn on the PTO. Madison is in Versailles. The Garrison barn is full. Pastor Hatfield is officiating at 2. Madison's uncle is walking her down the aisle." I closed my eyes for 1 second. Then I opened them. "Let's go." I pulled the John Deere out of the equipment barn at 6:43. Earl's pickup pulled in behind me. The 2 cruisers fell in line. We drove the half-mile to the gate of the west field. The diesel generator across the field was running. The catering trucks were unloading. 200 white folding chairs were lined up under the largest sailcloth tent. The wedding cake, 3-tier, white buttercream, hand-painted gardenia, stood on a cart by the stage. A string quartet was tuning instruments. I stopped the tractor at the gate. Celine Wickersham walked over with a clipboard. "Sir, this area is closed for a private event." "Ma'am, this area is a hayfield filed for fertilization at 7 a.m. Please stand back." She looked at Hollis. She looked at the sheriff. She looked at the 2 cruisers. She did the math fastest of anyone on that field that morning. She raised the clipboard in surrender and walked away. I unlatched the gate. I drove the tractor in. I lined up at the north corner. I let the engine idle. It was 6:59. Hollis looked at his watch. "Wyatt, it's time." I put my hand on the PTO switch. I waited for the second hand on the dashboard clock to sweep past the 12. Then I turned it on. The PTO engaged at 7:05 a.m. The first 30 feet of liquid manure left the fan spray nozzle at 38 pounds per square inch. It arced across the north end of the field in a perfect brown sheet. The smell hit before the spray did. The smell of 2,000 gallons of properly aged liquid cattle manure travels exactly the way Pat Brenneman had told me it would. West to east, 3 knots, a steady downwind plume that opened across the entire 2-acre wedding setup in under 40 seconds. It hit the catering crew. It hit the string quartet. It hit the wedding cake. It hit the sailcloth tents and the 200 white folding chairs, and the dance floor, and the bar. It hit Bridget Halloran's pearl-white silk robe at exactly 7:06 a.m. as she came running out of the largest tent screaming, "Stop him! Stop him! Stop him!" Sheriff Earl Van Sant stepped out of his county pickup and walked into the field. He raised both hands. "Ma'am, step back. This is a properly filed agricultural operation under Kentucky Revised Statutes 413.072. Mr. Caldwell is operating within the law. Step back, ma'am. He's destroying my daughter's wedding." "Ma'am, your daughter is in Versailles." For 3 seconds, Bridget did not understand what he had said. Then she did. She turned to look at the tents, already saturated, canvas drooping with brown mist, dance floor pooling, the wedding cake toppling sideways as the catering staff tried to drag it out of the spray zone. Then she sat down on the wet grass in her silk robe and screamed. She screamed the kind of scream women scream when an entire decade of bad bets cashes out in front of 200 witnesses. Catering staff ran. The string quartet ran with their instruments held above their heads. The wedding planner ran toward her parked SUV. The white bulb lights flickered as the cables shorted on wet ground. A second wave of guests who had just arrived in rented town cars stood at the gravel shoulder with their mouths open, holding gift bags, their dry cleaning still in plastic. Somebody's grandmother fainted. Somebody's nephew started filming on a phone. A teenage boy in a clip-on bow tie laughed so hard he had to sit down on a folding chair, and a moment later, he was wearing it. I drove the tractor in a slow, methodical, agronomic pattern across the entire 2-acre setup. The fan spray covered every tent stake, every aluminum pole, every linen tablecloth, every floral centerpiece. The application rate was 1,946 gallons per acre, well within Bourbon County's recommended agronomic range. At 7:17, 12 minutes into the spread, 3 black Kentucky State Police vehicles pulled into the gate. Lieutenant Maureen Polk of the Public Integrity Unit stepped out with a sealed federal warrant. She walked to where Bridget was still sitting in the wet grass. "Bridget Marlene Halloran, you are under arrest on charges of forgery in the first degree, bribery of a public official, conspiracy to defraud, and criminal trespass. You have the right to remain silent." The cuffs went on at 7:19. Doug Halloran was arrested at 7:23 on the 18th green of the Lexington Country Club, where he had been pretending to play golf while waiting to come to the wedding. Theodore Pickerel was arrested at his kitchen table at 7:26 while pouring himself a bowl of Cheerios. Celine Wickersham had already turned herself in 2 days before, on the strength of Hollis's sealed declaration, in exchange for a misdemeanor plea. By 7:40, the field was covered. The tents were saturated. The bridal party, those who hadn't already left for Versailles, were standing on the gravel shoulder in tuxedos and bridesmaid dresses, taking selfies in front of the destruction. I shut off the PTO at 7:42. I climbed down. I walked across the field to where Bridget was being placed in the back of an unmarked KSP vehicle. I stopped 6 feet from her. I said the only thing I said all morning. "Ma'am, this was my wife's field. You walk it again, you'll be doing it in handcuffs." The door closed. The vehicle pulled away. I walked back to the tractor. Hollis was leaning against the rear tire, drinking the last of his coffee, watching the bluegrass sun come up over Bourbon County. "Wyatt, best Saturday I've had in 20 years. At 2 p.m. that afternoon, Madison Halloran married Bryce in Ned Garrison's stone barn outside Versailles. She wore the dress her grandmother had worn in 1962. Her uncle, Doug Halloran's older brother, who had not spoken to him since 2014, walked her down the aisle. Pastor Calvin Hatfield officiated. Ned's wife served sweet tea and fried chicken to 114 guests under string lights they had hung that morning. The flowers were wildflowers picked from Ned's fence line. Bryce wore a tuxedo with a faint streak of manure dried on the left cuff. Madison laughed more in those 4 hours than she had laughed all year. I did not attend. I was on my porch. That evening, at sunset, I walked the west field in Maggie's blue rubber boots. The smell was strong. I did not mind. The grass would come back greener in spring than it had in 5 years. The field was hers again. I walked the full perimeter, the way she had walked it for 16 years. I cried for the first time in 4 years. Then I went inside. The cleanup took 11 days. Insurance covered most of it, the wedding planner's commercial policy, Bridget's personal umbrella, and a brief federal forfeiture order against Doug Halloran's commercial real estate company. The 2-acre setup was hauled away in 3 days by a Lexington restoration company. They had never billed an HOA matriarch for biohazard mitigation before. I am told they dined out on the story for a year. Bridget pleaded guilty in March on 6 counts. She got 4 years federal. Doug took 6. Theodore Pickerill cooperated and got 18 months and lost his county post for life. The Meadows HOA was placed under court-ordered receivership for 1 full year. A new board was elected in May, headed by a retired schoolteacher from Lexington named Linda Petticoat, who had moved into the Meadows in 2022 and had been quietly horrified by Bridget for 2 years. The first action of the new board was to send me a fruit basket and a formal letter of apology, hand-signed by every member of the board, including 3 families who had voted for Bridget twice. The second action was to amend the HOA's covenants to formally recognize the Kentucky Right to Farm Act, and to acknowledge that no resident of the Meadows had any authority over agricultural operations on adjoining parcels. I sent the fruit basket to the food pantry at First Baptist Paris. I framed the letter. Madison Halloran and Bryce sent me a wedding photograph from Ned's barn. The frame was hand-painted with little gardenias. The card said, "Mr. Caldwell, thank you for telling me the truth. I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve it. Madison." I keep the photograph on the mantel next to Maggie's. Eliza drove down from Louisville the Sunday after. She brought a Tupperware of her mother's chicken and rice casserole. She walked the west field with me at sunset. She wore my old work boots over her own socks. Pearl had been gone 7 years by then, but for one moment, as we crested the rise behind the gazebo, I thought I heard her bark. I did not say anything. Eliza did not either. We walked. When we got back, Eliza put her arms around me and said the thing her mother had always said when one of us came in cold. "Daddy, you did good." I held on a long time. The following spring, Hollis and I incorporated the Margaret Caldwell Legacy Defense Fund, a 501c3 nonprofit. It provides free legal representation to small family farms in Kentucky, Indiana, Ohio, and Tennessee. Nuisance lawsuits, encroaching HOA boards, predatory development offers, forged county permits. We staffed it with 2 retired ag attorneys, a paralegal, and 1 full-time extension agent named Pat Brenneman. She took early retirement from the county to work for us. In the first year, we represented 23 farms. In the second, 67. The logo of the fund is a small woman in blue rubber boots, walking across a hayfield at sunset, with a border collie at her heel. The west field came back greener than it had in a decade. I cut hay off it twice that summer. I sold the second cutting to the Garrison family at half price, and bought Ned a new haybine with the difference. He did not want me to. I did it anyway. Some debts are not about money. Sonny Albritton, my hired hand, said the field that fall produced more bales per acre than any of us had ever seen come off Caldwell land. He attributed it to the agronomic discipline of the spread. Hollis attributed it to Maggie laughing. I did not argue with either of them. This past October, on the second anniversary of the wedding that never happened on my land, Madison Halloran drove down from Cincinnati. She brought her husband Bryce and their newborn son. Madison asked if she could walk the west field with me at sunset. I said yes. The baby slept in a sling against Bryce's chest the whole way. At the gazebo, Madison stopped. She looked west, into the sun. "Mr. Caldwell, what was Maggie's favorite flower?" "Black-eyed Susan." She nodded. She took out a small black-eyed Susan plug she had been carrying in a paper cup all the way from Cincinnati. She knelt and planted it at the base of the gazebo post. I did not cry that day, but I felt Maggie laugh. After they drove back to Cincinnati, I walked the field one more time. The black-eyed Susan was small. The bluegrass was strong. The October sun was setting behind the gazebo, the way it had set for 16 years before the trouble began. And for the first time since Maggie died, I understood what she had been trying to tell me on the last morning I held her hand. The land outlasts the people who try to take it. The land outlasts the people who love it too. What we leave on it, a porch, a flower, a memory, a fight worth winning, is what makes it ours. If an HOA has ever tried to take your land, your livelihood, or your peace because they thought you were too small to fight, drop your story below. Subscribe so you don't miss next week. We follow a letter from a Wyoming rancher facing the same thing on 20,000 acres of his great-grandfather's land. Justice doesn't always look like a courtroom. Sometimes it looks like 2,000 gallons of liquid manure on a Saturday morning in October. Fans sprayed in a slow agronomic pattern across a hayfield. A man's wife had walked for 16 years in her blue rubber boots.
Friends, here's the thing about Bridget Halloran. She didn't lose because what kept her was meaner than her. She lost because she was patient. She had spent 2 years filing nuisance complaints, escalating fights, and trying to chip away at a man who had been farming the same 287 acres for 33 years. She thought because he was quiet, he was weak. She thought because he was alone after his wife died, he was breakable. She was wrong about both. The strongest men in any neighborhood are usually the quietest one. They have lawyers on retainer, and they have known for 40 years. They have schedules on file with the county. They have receipts. They have sheriff's deputies who used to hunt with their fathers. And they have, when the moment comes, the legal right to do exactly what the established operation has always done, even if the woman who set up a wedding on their land has learned the hard way. If your HOA has ever tried to walk over a working farm, a working trade, or your way of life, drop your story below. Subscribe so you don't miss the next week, when a letter from Wyoming brings a rancher facing 20,000 acres of trouble.